creepy TikToks that will blow your mind. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go!
Disclaimer: this video is for entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research, as these clips haven't been fact-checked.
This is why Tolkien is one of the greatest fantasy writers of all time, because behind me is the scene of Huon, the Hound of Valinor, fighting Karkaroth, the greatest werewolf to ever live. And Karkaroth means the Red Maul, but he was also known as Anthauglier, the Jaws of Thirst. And he's been empowered by two different things at this moment. The first, he's been fed the very blood of Morgoth, the Dark Lord who Sauron served under. And he's also eaten a Silmaril, which Beren had in his hand. Both have made him crazed and powerful, more powerful than any of the prior werewolves we've come across, including the sire of Karkaroth, Draugluin. What ends up happening is that Karkaroth, now crazed from the burning pain and consuming hunger being driven by him from the Silmaril, has broken through Doriath, specifically the Girdle of Melian, which no other fell beast has ever done. He's terrorizing the forest of Doriath. Eleuthingol, Beren, Beleg, and of course Mablung go to hunt him, including Huon, this hound from Valinor that served under Orome and the Sons of Feanor. What ends up happening though is that Karkaroth gets the drop on them and leaps out of a bush of thorns and attacks Thingol, only for Beren to defend him, using a spear to fight off Karkaroth, which he only knocks out and bites into the chest, ripping at Beren's chest area. Huon jumps out and attacks Karkaroth. And check this line out, because this is why I love Tolkien so freaking much. In that moment, Huon leaped from the thicket upon the back of the wolf, and they fell together fighting bitterly, and no battle of wolf and hound had been like to it. For in the baying of Huon was heard the voice of the horns of Orome and the wrath of the Valar. But in the howls of Karkaroth was the hate of Morgoth, and malice crueler than teeth of steel. And the rocks were rent by their clamor and fell from on high, and choked the falls of Esgalduin. There they fought to the death. But Thingol gave no heed, for he knelt by Beren, seeing that he was sorely hurt. You have the Hound of Valinor against the Beast of Morgoth, the greatest werewolf to ever exist, dripping with his hatred. A culmination of the battle of the powers of Middle-earth. The Valar against Morgoth, good versus evil, only to see that neither truly are the victor. Yes, Karkaroth was defeated, the Silmaril cut from his stomach, but what cost? The cost being Huon's life.
Huon truly was the bestest boy.
Distinct from the Nephilim that's recorded in Deuteronomy 2. So where do these Rephaim giants come from? They're either a different name for the giant, but why would they be named differently when they're called Nephilim in the beginning? So we get a second incursion account by offspring gods who rule after the flood versus the parent gods who ruled before the flood. Parent gods who ruled before the flood go to the pit prison. Offspring gods take over as the disloyal or rebellious host. Hebrew Saba for an army of angels rank in order so they would move up. So Baal moves up to replace El. Osiris moves up to replace Ra. Zeus moves up to replace Kronos. All of these create giants after the flood.
Mao Zedong was not a native speaker of Mandarin, and in fact, Mandarin speakers often struggle to understand his speeches without subtitles. Today, the word Chinese is often used to refer specifically to Standard Mandarin, but ironically, this would mean that Chinese was a foreign language to Mao. He was raised in the region of Hunan speaking Old Shang, and the difference between this language and Mandarin has been compared to the difference between Portuguese and French. In China, there's a group of languages which linguists call the Chinese languages, and they all descended from Middle Chinese. It's similar to Europe's Romance languages, which all descended from Roman or Latin. And in both cases, something called a dialect continuum formed. Over time, local varieties became more distinct from each other, with mutual intelligibility tapering the farther you went away from your birthplace. In some parts of Europe, you can still see this Romance dialect continuum pretty clearly, although the rise of national languages has made it less obvious. But when Mao was born in China in 1893, China's dialect continuum was still pretty smooth, meaning that you had to travel pretty far to realize that the whole country didn't just speak one language. So for instance, between Old Shang and Mandarin, there's New Shang, and it's between them both geographically and linguistically. Kind of like how Portuguese and Spanish are closer linguistically than Portuguese and French. Anyway, Mao had to learn Mandarin as a foreign language essentially, although another way to describe it might be gradually Mandarinizing his Old Shang. But his phonetics were always heavily influenced by his upbringing, leading to a distinct foreign accent. This is ironic because he was actually an enormous promoter of standard Beijing Mandarin. Other Chinese languages weren't officially banned, but they were given a subordinate status, which has led to many of them losing speakers over time. Kind of like how France smoothed over all the dialectal diversity that they used to have.
Don't forget, Mao Sparrow Genocide, 1958 to 60.
Today I'm going to be telling you about the story of the greatest friend of all time. Imagine having a friend who fought 300 men by himself and died standing on his own 2 feet. This is the story of Benkei. This story begins in 1189. Japan's greatest general, Minamoto no Yoshitsune, also known as Benkei's master, was betrayed by his own brother. He was once declared a war hero, now being persecuted and chased by his own brother. Realizing that this was the end, Minamoto decided to plan out seppuku. Seppuku is a spiritual suicide that samurai used in order to keep their honor rather than get captured. But he needed time to fully commit the ritual, and one man decided to step out and give his master time in order to commit said ritual, and that man was Benkei. Benkei guarded the bridge with his life. He fought wave of men, and it was said that he defeated 300 soldiers by himself. It got to the point that the army began to fear for their own lives facing this man. Realizing this, they decided to shoot arrows at him. He stood there taking arrow after arrow after arrow, and he stood there not making one move. He just tanked the arrows. Soldiers watched in fear, realizing that they have to confront him. As they approached, they realized something. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. They found out he was already dead. In order to give his master as much time as humanly possible, he died standing upright, causing the soldiers to stand there, watching, waiting for his next move, which stalled them for the longest time, giving his master enough time to fully commit seppuku. History remembers this as the standing death of Benkei, one of the greatest final stands ever recorded in human history.
If you're an anime fan, watch Kingdom. It's almost the same thing.
This is one of the most famous writers in Japanese history, but he was also a looksmaxer. Yeah, he was born to a samurai aristocratic family, and he was a direct descendant of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Later in life, he became obsessed with looksmaxing, not because he wanted girls, but because he wanted to die a beautiful, honorable death. And he later started his own private militia to try to restore Japan's old ways after World War II, and then threw a coup and failed, and then committed seppuku. And he was also probably gay. But why? See, most people know him as Mishima Yukio, but he was actually born in Tokyo in 1925 as Hiraoka Kimitake. Mishima was born to samurai aristocrats. Basically, his dad was a government official, his mom's family was super involved with samurai and that sort of thing, and his grandma was a direct descendant of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Yes, the military government, or the guy who started the military government, the shogunate, and ruled over Japan for 250 years. Mishima had a really traumatic upbringing. His grandma basically took him away from his parents and sheltered him. She didn't even let him go out in sunlight and play outside. He had to be sheltered in some random aristocratic home for many years. And because of this, he was very sickly and frail. He was returned to his family at the age of 12, and his dad was a strict military guy, so he was a strict parent as well. So his childhood was not the best. But something notable here is that he was showing literary genius. He was writing a lot of stories on his own, even at the age of 12. But his dad would try to stop this because it was effeminate. Fast forward a couple of years, he's obsessed with writing. He's writing short stories. He's writing everything. He's studying European authors like Friedrich Nietzsche, Oscar Wilde, and he's studying German too. So this guy was a genius. When World War II happened in 1945 and a doctor came to see if he was fit to be drafted, they thought he had tuberculosis, but he actually had a cold, and this absolutely broke him. He had the blood of a samurai, but he was not fit to fight for his country. A couple years later, in 1949, he drops Confessions of a Mask, or Kamen no Kokugaku, and becomes a literary star. He was Nobel Prize nominated 5 times, and he would even give interviews in English.
And they never think about future. They never think about past.
He then got super obsessed with looksmaxing, I called it, but it's really bodybuilding and martial arts. He got super obsessed with it to the point where he wrote a full essay or a short book or short story, whatever you call it, about how much he was obsessed with his body and why. He became even a model after this looksmaxing arc, and he was voted the most dandy man in Japan in 1967, beating out Toshiro Mifune, this guy. But to him, the body wasn't the goal. He was obsessed with dying beautifully. And stay tuned for part 2 because this is really, I can't fit this into one video. This is crazy, but pretty crazy.
This priest was a child predator and he found out the church can't save you when you're in prison. Also warning, this case is infuriating. John Joseph Gagin was ordained by the church in 1962. He was assigned to a parish in a town in Massachusetts. In December of that first year, another priest observed him taking boys into his bedroom and he spoke out about it. Afterwards, he denied it, but he told reporters years later that the church said they would brand him a troublemaker and send him to Peru if he didn't stop talking about it. The church sent Gagan to another parish, and he later admitted to assaulting 4 young boys in that first year. He only lasted 1 year at that next parish before being transferred again, and the church documents gave no reason as to why. Immediately after being transferred to St. Paul's, a man accused him of essaying his son. So the church sent him to treatment and then to another parish. After being sent to that parish, a mother accused him of essaying her 4 sons. The church ended up telling her to be quiet and then gave her a settlement. He was transferred a couple more times for the same stuff until the church finally sent him back to treatment and called it sick leave. After his sick leave, the church sent him to another parish and let him run 3 youth groups. While still doing the youth groups, a father accused him of inappropriately touching his son. He ended up retiring in 1993 because of it. After retiring, the accusations started to flood in. During his 30-year career, he was transferred over 6 times and accused of essaying 130 boys. Wow. After all this, the church finally defrocked him, which is essentially them stripping him of his church rank. And what's crazy is churches all over the world called it drastic and unprecedented. He was charged and convicted in 2002, but he was only convicted of inappropriately touching that last boy. And he ended up getting only 9 years in prison. But as soon as he got there, an inmate by the name of Joseph Lee Druce decided to take matters into his own hands. Druce cornered Gagan in his cell and then jammed the door so officers couldn't get in. He proceeded to throw Gagan to the ground and start stomping him out for minutes. Once Gagan was unable to move, he got face to face with him and choked him out until he was unalived. The state started investigating the guards for neglect, and they made a bigger deal about that than anything they did during John's 30-year essay spree.
So where do we send money to Joseph?
About 2,000 years ago, there was an Indian guy who visited the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. His name was Chikai Koran, and we know because he left behind 8 graffiti of his name written in Old Tamil in 5 separate tombs. There are many graffiti in Egyptian tombs, but most of them are in Greek and Latin. Just this year, we actually discovered and deciphered the Indian ones. All in all, there are 30 of them, dating between the 1st and 3rd century CE and written in 4 different Indian languages, 20 of them in Old Tamil and the other 10 in Sanskrit, Prakrit and Gandhari Karoshi. But let's actually go back to this Chikai Koran guy for a second, because not only did he leave behind most of the graffiti, he also did it in some very hard to reach places. Like in the tomb of Ramses IX, his signature was almost 6 meters above the tomb's entrance, and we don't really know how he got up there. There has been regular contact between Egypt and India for several centuries or even millennia, and many Indian traders came to the Egyptian Red Sea port of Berenike, but these graffiti also show that they very much acted like tourists, and were interested and amazed by the culture and history of Egypt.
There's an Iraqi folktale about a woman who outsmarts God, and it is dirty and hilarious, and like lots of Middle Eastern folktales about how cunning
How can you outsmart God?
women are. It's called the Chain of Truth. There's a man and his wife, and the wife is very beautiful, and unbeknownst to her husband, she has a lover. And she's bold about it too. The lover comes to visit her every time her husband just steps out of the house. After months of this, the husband starts to get suspicious, so he starts to question his wife, and she blew up in his face. What was he suspecting? How unbearable to be accused. She swore that she was as pure as milk and innocent as a babe in swaddling clothes. So the husband's like, all right, woman, get ready for traveling, because we're going to go to the Hill of Kaf, and there is a chain of truth that hangs down from heaven. Whoever touches that chain and swears falsely will be burned to ashes as if struck by 1,000 bolts of lightning. The wife's like, yeah, sure, let's go. She immediately runs to her lover, who happens to be a stable owner who rents out donkeys. And she's like, hey, offer my husband the best price when he comes to ask for 2 donkeys tomorrow. So he does, and the husband is so pleased, he not only hires 2 of the donkeys from the man he doesn't know is his wife's lover, he invites him to come along on the trip to take care of the animals. So the 3 of them head off to the Chain of Truth. They travel and travel, and when they reach the hill where the Chain of Truth is, the woman screams, oh, and throws herself off the donkey like she fell. She fell into the road and lay in the dust with her skirts up to her waist and her nakedness all bared. Then she cries and weeps and says, husband, it's because you dragged me out here that I have now bared my nakedness in front of another man. This is all your fault. So still sobbing, she goes up to the chain of truth, she grabs it, and in front of her husband and her lover, she swears that no man has ever seen her nakedness except her husband and the stable owner with them and the donkeys. And then they rode back, all three of them as happy and content as you could wish. But my favorite part is the end, which says that God in his wisdom pulled the chain from the hill because he saw that women knew how to evade his punishment, for such is their cunning, terrible cunning indeed. So even God's like, yeah, sorry, men, you're on your own. A lot of people know how dark and creepy folktales and fairy tales can be, but a lot of the times they are just hilarious, dirty jokes, and they're so funny. And they even still say something about how we feel about men and women back then and now. And I just love that.
Well, she wasn't lying technically. Legal loopholes exist, and she used hers.
This is something people need to know because it has been so covered up and mocked and berated and claimed to be a conspiracy theory. And by the way, the term labeling people as conspiracy theorists was invented by the CIA to deflect any attention over the JFK assassination. They invented that word as a way to shut down any scrutiny or this critical investigation of what they were doing. So they started that whole ball rolling. In terms of Operation Paperclip, it is documented. There's absolutely no question about it. Alan Dulles, CIA director, was associate of Heinrich Himmler of the Third Reich. So what Dulles proceeded to do when the Third Reich was brought down was he secretly brought all of the top Nazi scientists into the U.S. He falsified their files that he gave to Harry Truman, making them look like there were no war crimes. They brought these Nazi scientists into the CIA to work for the CIA, and that includes the human experiments they conducted on Jewish men, women, and children, and the psychological studies that these Nazi scientists had done. The CIA was using their expertise for these programs through Operation Paperclip, and this was Nazi, much of it occult beliefs that the CIA adopted and actually put these people on their payroll.
One of the programs that came out of Operation Paperclip was MKUltra. Now, MKUltra was a very complex program that dealt with human experiments and mind manipulation.
As this 1952 CIA memo says, the aim is controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will, and even against such fundamental laws of nature as self-preservation.
I truly believe that MKUltra created serial killers.
Most people remember the never-ending story as a fantasy about imagination. But what if the real reason we remember it is because it asked us a question most of us never answered? It looks like a simple fantasy. A kid named Bastian steals a book, skips school, hides in an attic, and reads about a world called Fantasia that's being destroyed by something called the Nothing. Inside the book, a warrior named Atreyu is sent to stop it, and
this is a movie?
Everywhere he goes, the same thing is happening. Entire parts of the world are just disappearing. No battle, no enemy to fight, just absence. But outside the story, Bastian is dealing with something more familiar. At the beginning, his father tells him to keep his feet on the ground, stop daydreaming, focus on what's real. So he reads the story like it has nothing to do with him. Until the movie breaks. Atreyu reaches the Southern Oracle and is told to pass a mirror to see his true self. And when he looks, he doesn't see himself, he sees Bastian. And that's the twist. Because now the story isn't just something Bastian is watching, it's something that's watching him back. We learn what the Nothing actually is. It's not a creature, it's what happens when people stop imagining. Fantasia isn't being destroyed, it's being abandoned by the one person who can save it, a boy, sitting in an attic, holding the story in his hands while it disappears. And at the center of it is the childlike empress who explains to Atreyu he can't believe that one little boy could be that important. And then the movie makes its final move. The empress turns past Atreyu, past the world, and looks directly at you, the one person who's been watching the movie the whole time. And she asks, why don't you do what you dreamed. And in that moment, the challenge Bastian is facing is the same one being handed to you. Because the nothing doesn't stay in the movie. It's what happens when something in your life goes unanswered, something you already know you're supposed to do, and instead you just don't. And whatever that could have been just disappears. Don't you remember? You already know. You've already chosen. Why don't you do what you dreamed?
I'm not crying. You crying.
There are more people dead underground in Paris than there are above ground. 6 million bodies in the Paris catacombs. People don't go into this enough. Let's talk about 7 freaking creepy things about Paris catacombs. Fact number 1, in the 1700s, there were cemeteries that were causing disease outbreaks. So they would take the bodies and put them underground in Paris. And it's not just random. They were put in these weird sections. Some people still can't decipher what sections they were put in. And there are entire walls of skulls just like this. I'm pretty sure this is probably a real picture. Remains date back to 1,000 freaking years. What? Number 2, the entire catacomb stretches, I believe it's 200 plus miles under Paris. And there are still miles and miles that we have never discovered. We don't know really what's down there. There are said to be hidden rooms, time lapses where time doesn't make sense down there. People have, that brings me to number 3, right? People have gotten lost and never found. Except this one man, right? He disappears, and then years later his body is found, and he's still clutching his camera. Post-mortem, clutching his camera. They watch the footage, and they find that the last piece of footage on there was him freaking running from something, and they don't know what it is. They couldn't see what it was. Y'all don't understand. It's actually literally a maze down there. What? Why would you even want to go? Number 4, just almost anything that is old in history, people have gone down there and heard whispers, they've heard footsteps, and there are sudden drops in temperature. Multiple people have attested, not even in the same group, different situations. People are oh my gosh, it randomly got super cold in here, and that doesn't even make any sense. Oh my gosh, I'm hearing things. I'm hearing whispers. And these are in groups, and you could say, okay, they're probably just scared, but they're not exploring it alone. They're in groups. So why would they? I don't know. Maybe that's just hysteria. I'm not sure. I believe it. I believe just about anything these days. There have been secret gatherings and rituals in the catacombs, and they found evidence of occult structures. They have found evidence of sacrifice. Because it's so long and is, like I said, a literal maze, you genuinely don't know what is happening. It's just deep dark woods or the ocean. It literally plays psychological tricks on you. This is kind of just more science than spooky. Like I said, miles and miles of just human remains next to you. There's no natural light, and it's super suffocating. Me, personally, as a claustrophobic girly, I could actually never. But yeah, a lot of people just feel like they're going insane down there. Again, why put yourself into this? I forgot the 7th one. I'm not going to lie, guys. I can make this into a whole series of different... I know you guys are always oh, stop asking us if we want a series. Of course we want a series. But I'm still going to ask you. As always, make sure you like and follow, and let me know if you want a series. All those spooky things that we can't really explain around the world.
You ever saw that movie, As Above, So Below?
What if the wound didn't break you, but it broke open the version of you that was way too small to carry what came next? We have all heard porcelain shatter as it smacks the ground and the sound fills the entire room. Bouncing off of walls, cabinets, you name it, you can hear it throughout the entire house. And this sound didn't ask for permission. It just filled the entire space as soon as the break happened. But that's how this always begins, not with a choice, but with a fracture. There's a pattern that keeps appearing across 2,000 years of story. Evil strikes a child, fails, and then leaves a mark. The crown of thorns pressed into the skull of Christ. The lightning bolt carved into the forehead of Harry Potter. Always at the crown and always at the brow, the place that you see from. Simone Weil called this affliction, not suffering, affliction. Grace fills empty spaces, but it can only enter where there is a void to receive it. And it's grace itself that makes this void. The specific pain that reaches so deep that it stamps the soul the way a stamp presses into wax. And in tarot, there is a card called the Tower. Lightning strikes the crown and the figures fall. This card is number 16, and a pattern we see in numerology is called reducing to a single digit. So 1 plus 6 equals 7. 7 is the number of victory. The Tower doesn't depict punishment. It depicts the only way that the false crown can come off.
The lightning doesn't ask any questions. It strikes and the results follow. Voldemort was Mark II by every time that he chose the wall over the wound. He built until nothing could touch him. What he called power is the definition of loneliness in the novel. So the question honestly isn't, was this fate or choice? The question is, did the thing that tried to break you break open something that needed to be opened? Because those are not the same question, and only one of them leads anywhere.
Shoot the zombie in the head. Only way to kill it.
You know, the baptismal font in Mormon temples is traditionally supported by 12 bulls, or oxen, to be more specific. The oxen are said to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, which correspond with the 12 signs of the zodiac. The tribe of Ephraim, as an example, is symbolic of Taurus, and is most often represented as an ox, or bull. Once the ritual is performed, the baptized are given the name of the tribe they're said to have descended from, or are adopted into. Interestingly enough, baptisms aren't just performed on living members of the church, but on deceased relatives as well, which is often referred to as a proxy or vicarious baptism.
The police from Louisiana got this crazy, disturbing call about this dude who had committed suicide by jumping off of a building and landing on top of a parking garage. But it gets deeper when they found out the reason why he took his own life. When the police pulled up to the scene, they noticed that this guy had a note inside his pocket, and the note said, "This wasn't an accident. I had to take my own life for the life that I took."
What?
Yeah, bro. And the rest of the note had an address, and he was pretty much saying that his girlfriend's body parts were at that house.
Whoa.
Yes, dude. The police immediately rushed to the house wherever it was at. They go over to the stove. There's 2 pots on the stove. One pot has a head inside of it.
I knew you were going to say that, bro. Oh.
The pot right next to it has arms and legs inside of it. Inside of the oven were torsos inside the oven.
What?
Yes, bro.
And he cooked it.
And he cooked it.
I'm so curious. Why did all this happen?
Dude. So the thing is that this dude was an ex-soldier. He was one of the soldiers that went out after the 9/11 stuff happened. So he was one of those guys that went out there.
Yeah.
And then when he came back, Hurricane Katrina happened in Louisiana. Him and his girl were damn near like homeless for a minute after Katrina, and they ended up doing a lot of drugs and alcohol together. They ended up getting this house together, the house where they ended up finding her body. She was kind of getting sick of his stuff because he would have a lot of like violent tendencies and everything. She ended up going to the landlord without him knowing and taking his name off the lease. He finds out one day, pulls up to the house. He ends up strangling her, sexually assaulting her body after he strangled her. And then that's when he decided to chop her into pieces, cook her body. And I'm talking about like, bro, like he had like vegetables cut to the side. Like I think he was planning on eating her. Yes. But then afterwards, I don't know if he had like a mental break. He ended up going over to this bar, drinking like crazy. This dude ended up jumping off of this like roof, landing on top of this parking garage.
Wow.
And that's when the police came and
found his
everything.
body.
Yeah, bro.
What the
Crazy, bro.
Here's how to become more lucky. Before the word luck existed, there was a word in Old English, weird, which meant to become. There was a line in Beowulf often translated as, "Weird saves the undoomed man when his courage holds." This line implies that fate exists, that luck is not random. Today we say that fortune favors the brave, as if bravery is some controllable variable to luck. Once fear is gone, luck comes to the rescue. We often don't see ourselves as capable of good luck, or worse, we see ourselves as undeserving. But most people don't even realize what they're capable of because they don't have the courage to fail or the perseverance to push beyond that latest threshold. Luck approaches the fearless and escapes the fearful. Man's courage breeds luck, but it is the unlucky who will say that luck made the man courageous. But this is backward, and it diminishes their own courage. It is consistent confrontation with what makes us fearful that brings luck. Courage allows us to meet what arrives. Fear and doubt dampen our perception, and they blind us to opportunities that might exist.
I'm blessed. I'm under grace.
The amount of ass this movie kicks. I'm talking about Clive Barker's Hellraiser, just number 1. And most people think Hellraiser is about demons invading this family. But really the whole film is just an occult initiation. And this puzzle box serves as the Cenobite's invitation. In many esoteric traditions, the seeker opens a door to hidden knowledge, believing they're ready to see what's behind the door. And Frank Cotton opens that door. I don't know any of these actors' names, so just go with it. Frank acts out of hunger that no ordinary life can satisfy. He wants experiences beyond human limits. He wants his brother's wife. And Pinhead and the Cenobites answer the call. They're considered monsters, but they're really keepers of a pact. They're a covenant. They're offering exactly what you want. But every pact has a price. Pinhead literally tells the audience they're demons to some, angels to others. And that line changes everything about Hellraiser. The Cenobites are agents of transformation. They're not just good or bad beings. Their realm strips away every false belief that humanity carries. And in alchemy, transformation begins with dissolution. The old form must be broken apart before something new can emerge. Frank's skin is removed. His flesh is torn away. That's that terrifying image when the mask is fully ripped off his face. Literally. Nothing false survives with Frank. And then comes his rebuilding. The film Hellraiser is about him getting a new skin. He's literally reconstructing himself, like bone and muscle. It's fucking awesome. And you'll notice something profound. His body does return, but his soul is still fucked. It's still absent. Because real transformation goes beyond the flesh. You can't just fuck your brother's wife. His spirit needs to be rebuilt, and it can't. So Frank tries to reverse that process through sacrifice and violence. And Pinhead and the Cenobites understand what Frank doesn't. You can't bargain your way past the consequences of your own choices. And the puzzle box reveals the true monster, Frank. He's the Hellraiser. He's ruining a family. This film, Clive Barker, man, I mean, like, no one does it like Clive Barker. It's really asking what happens when desire is your only religion. Because once the box is opened, every layer is going to be stripped away. And whatever remains is who you truly are. What do you think of the original Hellraiser? Drop a comment. And don't forget to follow, like, share, and favorite for more deep dives into we need more movies like this.
You know, pain shows you who you really are.
They are simply telling us to our face. If you don't hear it, it's because you choose not to. Listen to this.
There's a cognizance, I believe, within the intelligence community, particularly CIA, that there are humans among us that might be more extraterrestrial than human. And how do you identify them? That could be a major factor in why we're interested in that. And there's also the, I guess you would call contact tracing of like who's who. Right. And so what they did reveal that there was an interest in certain families. How would you understand families? I understand families to mean bloodlines. Right. That they were interested in certain bloodlines going back to ancient times. Who knows? Ancient times.
Wow.
Did they mention other heritages around the planet that through this marker? I was specifically told that the Cherokee heritage, the Cherokee Nation, had something to do with the phenomenon. And furthermore, that it has something to do with perhaps even the actual existence of Atlantis. That they may have been survivors of Atlantis.
Looks like we have our reason on what he was actually searching for. Cherokee, huh? I mean, this would explain a lot. They've been searching. This is not new. Just new to us. Atlanteans? That's why they was looking for America, huh? That's why the old structures can't be recreated. Temporary mind. Just kidding, y'all. This video is only for entertainment purposes. But make sure to like and comment and let me know your thoughts.
Explaining the iceberg of historical timelines that just don't seem right. Victorian era during the Wild West. So these were obviously very different societies, but you know, the cowboys were having their gunfights and there was all these frontier towns while there was these wealthy Victorians in England attending their formal dinners and such. And it's just interesting to think about because you don't think about the cowboys existing at the same time as this. Something that you don't think about a lot either is that the cowboys are always depicted with the southern accent, but it's a lot more likely they had much more of a blend of this European sounding accent. First flight 66 years before the moon landing. It's just crazy that the gap between the Wright brothers' first airplane and humans landing on the moon is so shockingly short. First flight was in 1903 and the moon landing was in 1969, so that's only 66 years. When you think about it, somebody could have lived to see the first heavier than air engine powered flight, and then humans walking on the moon. And, you know, that acceleration of technology just seems wrong. Like, what happened? I guess war. Last guillotine execution is the same time as Star Wars. So France was still using their guillotine as an execution method until 1977. So that means that the final state-sanctioned guillotine execution happened the same year Star Wars was released. So people were watching a space opera with lightsabers when heads were rolling. Santa Fe was already a city during Plymouth Rock. So this one really messed with my mind when I was reading about this. But when the Pilgrims were landing on Plymouth Rock, you could actually already go visit what is now the town of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and stay in a hotel and eat at restaurants and buy Native American silver. Americans kind of mentally placed this colonial New Mexico much later than the Pilgrims landing. But this is because, you know, the Spanish settlements in the Southwest predate many famous English colonies, which is something that honestly we should learn a lot more about. And this was in 1620, by the way. But it's just crazy to think about all these different timelines and how we mix them up in our minds. I don't have a lot going on in my mind, so when I find one of these things, it just really messes me up for a little bit. But anyways, thank you guys for watching and being a watcher of my videos. Comment what you want me to do next. Watch my YouTube if you want to see some longer stuff, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Do you know samurai existed at the same time as the OS?
NASA sent 2,500 jellyfish into space, and then 60,000 of them came back with a problem that could change everything that we know about living off Earth. So basically, NASA wanted to answer one of the scariest questions that we have about space, which is what happens to a living thing that's born up there and then has to come back. They obviously weren't able to send human babies, so they sent the next best thing, which was 2,500 baby jellyfish. Astronauts had to inject chemicals to trigger their growth, and then 9 days later, 60,000 jellyfish were orbiting Earth. Then, whenever they brought the jellyfish back home, the jellyfish couldn't function. They weren't able to tell which way was up, they pulsed and they swam in random directions, and they had severe vertigo permanently. They're saying that the jellyfish's gravity sensors developed in zero gravity, and then once they hit real gravity, their bodies had no idea what to do with it. I know you're probably confused right now, so this is why it matters. Humans actually have almost the same exact gravity sensing system, which is tiny crystals in our inner ear that tell our brain which way is up. If jellyfish are completely unable to develop that system properly in space, there's a real chance that human babies born off Earth would not be able to live on it either. We can officially send humans to space to orbit in zero gravity, we just might not ever be able to bring their children back.
That is why the Valkyries are called the Valkyries, the choosers of the slain. They select the slain to take them to Valhall, the hall of the slain, to join the Einherjar. Literally those who fight alone. Einherjar, army of one. Those souls who wage wars against evil all by themselves and get fucked up. You getting fucked up is not a punishment. It's a blessing. These are the warriors who Odin, the mad god, has to recruit to fight in Ragnarok at the end of the world. He needs the best warriors to die in battle so he can have them for the apocalypse. He needs them so bad that he'll even intentionally fuck them over. Odin shatters Sigmund's sword Gram with his spear so that Sigmund will die in battle because he needs him for the war in the hereafter. Every time I get fucked up, I remember it's because I'm loved. Because I'm needed. Suffering is not a punishment. Death is not a punishment. It's selection. If I'm left all by myself to fight alone against 1,000 demons, to fight against the forces of Ahriman, that's best news I've ever heard. Suicide mission, best news I've ever heard. Certain death, best news I've ever heard. I can't lose. I chose to be here. How can you bitch? That's like playing like a Madden tournament with your buddies, and then you get the sticks and you go like 21 skunk and start bitching about it, bro. Nut up. Because there were probably a bunch of other Fravashis saying like, man, I want that life. Look how fucking hard that life is. I want that because then I can be useful. Then you got it. Then you forgot about it and now you're bitching. But always remember, you chose to be here, and in your suffering, you are still chosen too. It is impossible to lose. You're fucked, man. Lighten up. I will perform the utmost or perish in the fiend's clutches. If I slay, I go to heaven. If I conquer, I enjoy earth. I can't lose. Whoever loses his life willingly will find it. Glory is the warrior's only bulwark against death. Fuck you, Araman.
Hey, I'm with Christ. I don't lose.
Do you like weird stories? This is one of the weirdest stories in rock history. I'm Mel Z. I talk about death, true crime, and dark pop culture lore. If you're a weirdo too, follow me. In the 1970s, a luxury flat in London quietly became the site of one of the strangest coincidences in rock history. The apartment belonged to Harry Nilsson, a musician known for throwing legendary parties. His place in Mayfair was a revolving door of rock stars, people coming and going, drinking, and burning through fame in real time. In 1974, Cass Elliot of the Mamas and Papas, now out on her own, was staying in the flat after performing a sold-out run in London. She'd just finished 2 weeks of shows, her career was resurging, things were looking up. And then on July 29th, 1974, she went to sleep in that apartment and never woke up. She died at just 32 years old. 4 years later, in 1978, another huge rock star moved into that flat. This time, it was Keith Moon, the iconic drummer from The Who. Harry Nilsson was reluctant to rent the flat out again, but was convinced by Pete Townsend that the flat was not cursed. Keith Moon was one of the most infamous drummers in rock history, known for his wild behavior, heavy drinking, and living as if there were no consequences. By this time, though, things were catching up with him. He was trying to stay sober and was taking medication to manage alcohol withdrawal. On September 6, 1978, after a night out in London with Paul McCartney, Moon returned to the apartment, the same one where Cass Elliot had died 4 years earlier. He went to bed and never woke up. He was also just 32. Same city, same building, same apartment, same age. Two of the biggest names in music dying in the same room just 4 years apart. It's very strange. For years, rumors swirled that Cass Elliot had died by choking on a ham sandwich, but that was something later proved to be false. The rumor continued to spread, though, probably because of fat phobia and in an attempt to try to humiliate her, probably. She actually died of heart failure. Keith Moon's death, on the other hand, was caused by the very medication that was meant to help keep him sober. Eventually, Harry Nilsson was so disturbed by what happened in the apartment that he sold it to Pete Townsend of The Who and moved back to the States. I guess even in rock and roll, some coincidences are just too close to home and way too hard to ignore. Did you know this story? I had never heard it until recently, and it is absolutely nuts.
I've got a new conspiracy theory for you. I mean, new to me anyway. Has anybody ever heard that the explorers of the Mariana Trench saw some man-made markings or what looked like man-made structures when they went down there? Has anybody ever heard that? Now, you might think that that's impossible. Well, here are the 5 things that I learned about the pre-flood world when I discovered the sandcastle culture. Who is the sandcastle culture? Well, they are the culture that is responsible for the terraforming of the Paleozoic layers. And it really does appear like it has to do with the Sumerian gods in this Anunnaki situation. Number 1, before the flood, the Earth didn't have oceans. It really does appear like the entirety of our globe, or flat Earth, whichever one you want to say, seemed to be a system of rivers and lakes. This pre-flood world with no oceans is actually mentioned in the One Piece series of animation. So in theory, there should be man-made structures all the way at the bottom of the ocean because those oceans didn't exist and mankind had access to these areas long ago. Number 2, the coexistence of dinosaurs and or dragons with humanity. It really does appear that in the pre-flood world, well, it was kind of like the land of the lost. Those dinosaurs, I do not believe personally that they were dinosaurs. I think they are dragons, just as history states. And they aren't natural to our world. I believe that they were engineered by whoever did the terraforming. And if these dragons coexisted with humanity, well, then that doesn't put them very far in the past, and that might answer some of the strange things that we find. And number 3 is the clothing of the pre-flood world. We actually have examples of clothing accessories that we have identified belonging to this earliest culture. And it really implies that the majority of this stuff was robes, some type of loose clothing with toggles and sashes and buttons. Because the Hongshan items, these pendants, are not pendants at all. They are these clothing items. Which leads to number 4, the existence of the Nephilim and or large humans. A lot of these clothing items are proper sized for everyday use of individuals our current size. But there's also these same exact items massive. So if we're saying that these things are belt buckles and different types of clothing items, well, if they appear in oversized variations, well, then that implies that the individuals using them were also oversized. So either it's the existence of the Nephilim, or humans in general were much larger than we are now. And number 5 is that this culture that inhabited the world at that time before the flood was a world culture. The Olmec culture and the Hongshan culture have shared similarities that people have discussed for a long time. And that's precisely because they are part of that first world culture. And that's why the stuff in the Olmec culture does look similar to the stuff in the Hongshan culture, because it's the same world culture.
The Complete Illustrated Book of the Psychic Sciences by Walter B. Gibson and Litzka R. Gibson is a highly regarded beginner-friendly encyclopedia of the occult. Originally published in 1966, it provides a comprehensive overview of 17 different esoteric and metaphysical traditions. Core topics in this book covered. One thing for sure is that it acts as a primer for foundational practices in New Age and Mantic arts, including astrology, numerology, palmistry, which is palm reading, phrenology, tarot, and cartomancy, yoga, telepathy, and dream interpretation. This book is frequently praised for being an excellent, accessible starting point for beginners. It covers a wide breadth of topics in a clear, straightforward manner rather than getting bogged down in dense academic prose. The drawback: because the text is from 1966, it is considered dated. Readers often know that the material is not modernized, making it best used as a historical reference rather than a definitive guide for contemporary practices. Who should read it? Look, if you are looking for a historical, well-organized overview of occult and spiritual practices, it is a fun and essential read. However, for modern, actionable instruction on any of the specific subjects, it is recommended to pair it with newer, topic-specific literature.
It looks like Kabbalah stuff. Don't do it. Witchcraft.
Did you know that the British royal family, the House of Windsor, actually had a different name to Windsor, and the name Windsor was created to solve a bit of an awkward problem? Now, to tell this story properly, we need to go back to the Victorian era. That was 1837 to 1901, during the reign of Queen Victoria. Now, she was of the House of Hanover. That was her father's house, his name. And when succession happens, the next monarch becomes the monarch, they take their father's name. Queen Victoria was married to Prince Albert. Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, a prince of a duchy in Germany. Then when Queen Victoria died in 1901, her son Edward VII became the King of England. But instead of taking the name Hanover, he took the name Saxe-Coburg and Gotha from his father. Now in 1914, World War I began. And as you can imagine, people in Britain started to hate. A big hatred was building towards the Germans. And so the name Saxe-Coburg and Gotha started to become a bit of a problem for the British royal family. And things really began to become a problem when the Germans in World War I started using a bomber to bomb London called the Gotha. So this made things even worse. Your royal family shares the same name with your enemy's bomber coming over to bomb you. So to combat this, King George V decided to change the name of the royal family, and he picked Windsor due to Windsor Castle. It's an historic castle in English-British history. And so in 1917, the 17th of June, today, King George V changed the name of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the House of Windsor.
The Siege of Malta. This is one of the craziest true stories of underdog. These are called the Knights Hospitallers. These guys are a fighting force for the church, right? The Holy Roman Empire. Now you've basically got like a more modern age crusade kind of thing. Now the Ottoman Empire. They were a massive force. The Ottoman Empire is one of the biggest, longest empires of all time. These guys are trying to move their influence and expand their territory. Well, the Knights Hospitallers are given an island. If you guys haven't seen Malta, you know, it's a small island there. And there was this little part right here that had a jet out, right? The Turks or the Ottomans are trying to, you know, move around and do stuff like this, but they keep attacking them, right? And these guys are pissing them off. The night hospitalers that are here, they send a guy, okay? He's a 70-year-old Frenchman. We'll call him JPV. The Ottomans, they want to get to Rome eventually, but they can't because there's got Malta. There are only 600 knights here. And then one day, they look out and the horizon lifts. It's not the ocean. It's 200 Ottoman warships and 40,000 troops. JPV, he realizes we're in for a fucking fight. He goes into the Maltese town and he says, listen, there's only like 5,000 people that live on this island. They all take up arms. He basically says to them, either you burn your house down and poison the water wells here, or you'll be burned in your house while it's burned down by them. There are 600 knights led by a French guy, and 500 militia, civilians, and slaves. Well, this little star is a place called Fort St. Elmo. The Ottomans begin bombarding it with cannonballs. They start breaking down parts of the walls. They start charging. 28 days. They cannot get through there. On the 31st day, tens of thousands of Ottomans and Janissaries charge this little fort. It comes down to hand-to-hand combat at this point. Ottoman generals killed. Half of the Janissaries and 6,000 Ottomans died taking this fort. Almost every single defender dies. So now they got to charge the other two forts. They end up firing 130,000 cannonballs. They end up mining tunnels, okay, trying to get under these forts. They cannot break through. They charge in the walls, hand-to-hand combat. At this point, it's the remaining knights, JPV, the civilians, the slaves, and even the women. The Ottomans are being cut down at a rate of 5 to 1 at one point. It gives enough time for a Spanish relief force to show up on September 7th, a month and a half later, 2 months later. Ottomans, between the disease that they have from just passing around the poisoned wells, remember? They see the Spanish relief force and they're just like, they flee. 3 out of every 4, 75% of the Ottoman invaders were killed trying to take this tiny little island.
The sins you don't commit, you call evil. The sins you do commit, you call being human. That one sentence is your entire moral code, and it's quietly rigged in your favor. The liar judges the cheater judges the thief, and the thief judges the addict. Everyone draws the moral line exactly 1 inch past their own sins. You tell little white lies, but you never cheat, so you look down on the cheater. Someone else cheats, but will never steal, so they look down on the thief. Every person picks the sins they're comfortable with, quietly forgives themselves for those, and judges everyone whose sins just happen to be different. We're all sinners, we just chose different ones. And then we built an entire sense of being a good person around the specific sins we happen not to commit. Your morality isn't always a clean standard you live up to. A lot of the time, it's just a map of temptations you personally don't have. The person you're judging right now is judging someone else for the exact thing you do. Everyone's standing on their own little island of sin, pointing at everyone else's.
To sin is to be human. To indulge in it is a completely different story.
Most aesthetic men in ancient history, Greeks, Romans, Spartans, all followed this one training principle that modern fitness has completely overcomplicated, and almost nobody does this. You go to the gym a couple times a week, you train hard, you eat clean, but it doesn't look like you lift. This could be why. Ancient warriors figured out early that aesthetics aren't built through perfect programming. They're built through 2 laws: progressive overload and consistency. Most people today can't do this. They chase the perfect split, they overthink on rest days, and switch programs every month or so, but the ancient warriors did something different. Progressive overload consistently. They showed up every single day. Milo of Croton in 540 BC carried a bull on his back when it was a baby calf to when it was a full-grown bull for 4 years straight. Spartans trained from 7 years old up until they were full-grown men progressively. Romans would walk multiple miles with weighted vests and then fight. And that's the pattern right there. Ancient warriors didn't overcomplicate this. They just progressive loaded day in and day out. No switching up in their programs, no doing different workouts, just showing up each and every single day. Train 3 to 4 times a week. Push, pull, legs, upper body. Add weight weekly. Eat a clean whole food diet. This is exactly how ancient warriors built god-tier physiques.
Good stuff.
The Greeks also had their own mythic origins for the Scythian peoples, and it goes like this. Heracles had once visited this land of Scythia, and while sleeping one night, his horses went grazing and mysteriously disappeared. He found them in a cave being kept by a mysterious viper maiden, a woman who is half snake on the bottom and half human from very specifically the buttocks up. She promised to give Heracles his horses back if he would do one thing for her, and that was provide her with children. Heracles accepted, and she gave birth, much like in the original story, to 3 children, the youngest of which being named Scythes. Once the boys were fully grown, they were faced with the challenge of stringing their father Heracles' bow, and whoever could do it first would rule over the other 2 brothers forever. Obviously, the 2 eldest brothers failed, and the youngest, Scythes, was able to string the bow, and thus he became the progenitor of the royal Scythians.
And there's a place on the Big Island called Waipio Valley. The cliffs on either side rise nearly 2,000 feet. Waterfalls drop from the top and disappear into mist before they reach the valley floor. The valley itself is almost a mile wide, filled with taro fields and wild ginger. And at the far end, the rivers pour straight into the ocean. Waipio is something called the Valley of the Kings. And this is where generations of Ali, the chiefs, were buried, their bones hidden so carefully that many have never been found. The valley floor is considered one of the most spiritually charged places in all of Hawaii. And the Ali are at rest. But the warriors who serve them are not. And that is what the Huakaipo are. Men who spent their lives guarding their chiefs, walking these trails, moving between the temples in the dark, and when they died, they kept doing it. But not because they were lost, not because they didn't know they were dead, because that was their purpose. And in purpose, in this tradition, doesn't end with the body. The chiefs they served have been in the ground for centuries. The temples they were marching between have crumbled. The trails have been paved over, built on, and forgotten. And they are still walking. And he explained where the marchers came from. Honokoa Gulch, known as the Valley of the Chiefs and Warriors, and where they were going. Pukolaheyao, the great temple Kamehameha built on the hill above the harbor. And that trail had been walked for centuries. And the back section of the house was left dark. You know, the kind of dark where you hold your hand in front of your face and can't see it. One night, Mel woke up, and he'd been told what to listen for. And he heard it. First, it sounded like metal, like pans cracking in heat. Then, underneath that, something heavier, slow, like chains dragging. So he went to the window, and these beings, they passed outside in formation, torches moving through the dark, heading toward the heiau on the hill. He watched until they were gone, and he stayed awake for a long time after. The question he kept returning to was not whether they were real. He already knew the answer to that. He wondered, is this what they do forever? Will they still be walking long after everyone who remembers them is gone? After the houses are torn down? After the roads cover the trails? Will they still be walking?
Seems a bit of a raw deal for the martyrs.
Okay, so this guy went from working at Lockheed Martin to build a dome promised to heal humanity through resonance. And right before it was completed, he mysteriously died and was cremated without his family knowing. Okay, so George Van Tassel, he worked as an aviation engineer for Lockheed Martin, who was supposedly contacted by this interdimensional being, did not like nuclear war, followed by a being telepathically gave him instructions to build something named an Integratron. It gets so interesting. This Integratron was centered around plasma. Yes, plasma, the fourth state of matter. It has metaphysical applications, he said. I'm also writing a book about plasma. The link is in my bio, but I just figured this out, and I'm freaking. According to him and the being, the building was built to generate these magnetic fields that would result in the generation of plasma in the form of a coronal discharge and negative air ionization inside the building. It would help everything from anti-aging to possibly curing cancer. It had to do with a Tesla coil. Building would basically resonate with the cell's frequency, recharging the cells of a person, rejuvenating them. And right before he finished it, he literally died and vanished. And I'm not into like conspiracies, but this one, like, I think is real. I also think it's real because plasma does have healing properties. I think he didn't achieve it. Guess maybe the government, whatever. So it had some weird doomsday prophecies, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because plasma reflects belief. I think this plasma stuff is magic. You just need a healed nervous system to be able to channel it and ground it in reality.
10 out of 10 quotes.
There's a film about his story called Calling All Earthlings, something like that.
Will completely shatter your perception of self. Number 1, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Number 2, you are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. Alan Watts. Number 3, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Number 4, a man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary. Seneca. Number 5, the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. Number 6, desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Naval Ravikant. Number 7, between stimulus and response there is space, and within that space is our power to choose our response. Viktor Frankl. Number 8, opportunities to find deeper powers within ourselves come when life is the most challenging. Joseph Campbell. Number 9, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. Pablo Picasso. Number 10, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Friedrich Nietzsche. Make sure you save these for later and follow for more content like this.
You look at shapes like the yin yang, you have the public side and you have the esoteric side. The esoteric side is talking about the science behind the symbol, and there is a lot of it. The yin-yang, or taijitsu in Taoism, is a way of noting the torus. We all know it means balance, harmony, but you don't really get a grasp of this until you map it to a torus. In physics, the torus is its equivalent. Light in the dark in the light are just another way of noting the cyclical motion of energy throughout the torus. That cyclical motion is noted at the tips and the midpoint of the yin-yang. Using a radiograph, you can note the solstices and equinoxes. It's an ancient spiral science. You probably know this from the Celts and the Druids. It's called sympathetic vibratory physics. A very versatile methodology. It can be applied to many things like sound. This is how the chromatic circle of fifths works. That is because the yin-yang is a harmonic fractal. That just means the proportions look the same at any scale. Like music, a low C and a high C sound the same, they're just different pitches. The magic happens when you get it to spin. As it spins and divides, it still looks the same even though there's a lot more going on underneath. It gets more wild in 3D. If you add more axes and you add more shapes, they will never intersect when they spin. This is really similar to the concept of spinners in quantum science, where these things can spin and never get tangled. To draw this shape correctly, you need to know a little bit of sacred geometry, and the seed of life is one of the easiest ways to do that. To get the inner circles right, you need to know how to correctly draw a pentagram within those circles, otherwise it'll come out looking off balance. This differentiated the people that knew what the symbol meant from the people that didn't. If you know your alchemy, you'll know that the symbol was hidden for many thousands of years because of the power it held within the transmutation circle. That is Bob Grinier's work, not mine.
Brilliant breakdown, man.
They are gatekeeping breath holding. When you hold your breath for 90 seconds, your body thinks it's dying and responds by activating an ancient survival pathway, hypoxic inducible factor 1. This activates stem cells in your blood and bone marrow. Triggers EPO, which is the same hormone Lance Armstrong was injecting during the Tour de France. You also get a 556% increase in growth hormone from a single 90-second breath hold. Growth hormone burns fat, builds lean muscle, repairs tissue, and boosts testosterone. It also triggers VEGF, which creates new blood vessels in your body, improving oxygen flow to every single organ, including your testes, which will improve your testosterone levels.
Cosmic horror.
Man, I can't hold 35 seconds.
Movies like Annihilation or Event Horizon are fantastic, but I've got a bit of a hidden gem, and I bet you haven't seen it. I'm talking, of course, about The Endless. I've even got the Blu-ray. That's how much I believe in this one. Welcome back to Movies with Seb. I'm Seb, I love movies, and today we're talking about The Endless. Low-budget indie movies can be a bit hit or miss, and I think usually it's because they're smaller budget, and if you're only used to like a certain caliber of movie, it can be quite jarring. But this one from 2017, which is not that far ago, actually it's 10 years ago, not that far ago, caught me off guard. At the time, I was into H.P. Lovecraft, like I was reading the works, I was reading the fandom, and The Endless got recommended to me, and I'm so glad I watched it. So what's it about? Well, it's hard not to spoil this movie, so I'm gonna try and keep it surface level, but there's these two brothers who fled from a cult when they were younger, and they then get an invitation to come back, and they're somewhat curious. But as they dive deeper into the cult, they start feeling like they have a point. Maybe this place isn't too bad. Or is it? The criticisms for this movie are usually around the pacing, and yes, it is a slow burn, there's no way around that. But I think it's about the vibes. I think it's about the way you watch it. I think if you put it on the TV, draw the curtains, put your phone in another room, get some snacks, get really comfy, you'll have a great time. The movie plays a bit like an episode of True Detective, or maybe Lost, and if you give into it, or if you lean into it, I should say, it has a lot to give back. I had a great time. I think you will too. Let me know what
what you think. And if you're still with me, make sure to follow.
John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness introduced us to one of the most terrifying entities ever put to film. And that's saying a lot because we don't even get to see its face. Yes, I'm talking about the demonic alien creature known as the Anti-God. In the film, we learn a Christian sect known as the Brotherhood of Sleep found this canister in the 16th century. And this green liquid is not only evil and sentient, it is quite literally Satan. The canister was actually moved to the New World, where the Brotherhood of Sleep continued to watch over it in an abandoned church in downtown Los Angeles. After the passing of the last member of the Brotherhood of Sleep, the Catholic Church became fully aware of what this thing was. And a group of scientists were actually brought in to study it. This is when we learned that Satan actually had a terrifying plan in place to bring his father, the Anti-God, to Earth to destroy our planet. Now, shots of the Anti-God were always hazy in this film because they were done in dream sequences. But what we do know is the Anti-God was a cosmic entity of pure evil and antimatter. This immortal and malevolent entity had been banned to the darkest realms of antimatter by God. And Jesus was actually an alien that was sent to Earth to warn us about the alien dangers of both Satan and the Anti-God. Bro. And Satan's plan nearly worked. The Anti-God was this close to coming to Earth. And if it wasn't for Catherine's sacrifice and Father Loomis finding his faith, he would have won. And he actually may have if you believe Brian Marsh's twist-ending dream sequence, which actually showed Catherine becoming the vessel and emerging from the church in the future. With a chilling warning, this is not a dream.
Jesus is God.
Before Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, this Indian prince made Kung Fu popular in China. His name was Bodhidharma, a prince from what is now Tamil Nadu. He gave up his kingdom to become a Buddhist monk and sailed to China to spread the Dharma. But the Chinese emperor wasn't impressed, so Bodhidharma walked away to the mountains. He showed up at the Shaolin monastery next, and they refused him entry too. So he sat in a cave outside the temple and stared at a wall for 9 years. Apparently he fell asleep at the 7-year mark, and was so angry with himself for breaking his meditation that he cut his eyelids off. It said where his eyelids hit the ground, the first tea plants grew. However, tea was consumed prior in China. Just ask Uncle from Jackie Chan Adventures. Anyway, when the monks finally invited him in, he noticed they were physically frail, being hunched over scriptures all day. Bodhidharma taught them breathing and movement exercises rooted in Indian yoga, and probably some ancient Indian martial arts as well. These exercises became the physical foundation of Shaolin.
Really?
But beyond the physical, Bodhidharma's greatest contribution was mental. His philosophy of direct experiential learning and intense focused meditation became Zen Buddhism. Bodhidharma's teachings spread across East Asia as he became one of the most influential Indians ever, simply by staring at a wall. Follow the emissary for more untold ancient history.
If you want to go to Zoroastrian heaven, you will have to cross the Jinvad Bridge, the bridge that connects the material world of the living with the immaterial world of the dead. But it is guarded by 2 4-eyed dogs, and depending on your artha, your righteousness or truthfulness, it can look very different and be either easier or harder to cross. So if you don't have enough artha, the bridge will become more narrow, and the demon Chinnafapast will drag your soul down to the Drujdemana, the house of lies. But if you do have enough artha, the bridge will become wider, and the Daena will guide your soul into Garodemana, the house of song. And now there is actually a very interesting Middle Persian text that talks about the journey of a certain Ardaviraf to the afterlife after taking a few drugs. So then on his journey to heaven, he first passed Hamistagan, the purgatory, where the souls of those men whose good works and sins were equal remain. He then passed the Star Trek, the place where good thoughts are received, the Moon Trek, the place where good words are received, and the Sun Trek, where good deeds are received, before he finally reached Garotman Paradise, where numerous gods, angels, spiritual leaders, and Ormazd himself awaited him. But he still kept going and reached a great river of lamentation and weeping, and beyond that river, hell itself. He saw the souls of many men and women being tortured for all eternity for the sins they committed, until in chapter 100 he saw the evil spirit himself, the deadly, the world destroyer, whose religion is evil, Ahriman.
Yeah. First, only one specimen has ever been found before, 114 years ago. And we found the second one. The biggest discovery in my entire career was the week after I saw you last.
Wow.
Yeah. It was amazing.
What kind of tortoise is this?
The Fernandina Island tortoise, big Galapagos tortoise on this crazy active volcano on far remote Galapagos. We had gnarly sunstroke, heat stroke, I mean, everything. And after a few days of hiking up and down this volcano, we found scat, and then we found a dig, like a tortoise had been digging. And 15 minutes later, we found the animal.
Well, I mean, how many of them are in the wild?
There's a return.
Man, what's the picture? You didn't picture
Turn
it?
trip that just one more turn trip just went right now, and then another one will go in January. But what's great is on the first return trip, they had to bail because of weather, and the weather is very harsh there. They found evidence of 2 more animals. So things are looking really good.
So there might be like 4 alive on the planet?
Well, right now there's one. The one we found. She's literally the rarest animal in the world.
I'm sorry, but scientists have just found your brain's on and off switch. Oh my god. This is genuinely terrifying. The fact that this now means your consciousness can actually be turned on and off. What? So the initial research was conducted back in 2014 when scientists were studying a woman with severe epilepsy. Nothing unusual was going on until they ran one test which, changed everything. They stimulated one tiny part of her brain called the claustrum. And well, the second that they activated this part of the brain, she just stopped. No movement, no speech, nothing. But the craziest part was she looked fully awake, but inside she was completely gone. Then they stopped the simulation and instantly she came back, like nothing happened. No memory, no idea she'd even been switched off and put in this state. Now let that sink in, because what the hell could that mean? I don't want it. The scariest part about this whole damn thing is that this proves the fact your reality, your thoughts, your entire personality are controlled by something smaller than your fingernail inside your brain. And if that part is disrupted, even for a second, you're still there physically, but inside you disappear and you wouldn't even know. Scientists are now saying in more recent studies that have been conducted that this could be the key to consciousness itself, which means we may be one step closer to controlling it, which is even scarier. But darker again is the fact that who knows, this could be being switched on and off day in, day out, almost like a simulation, and you genuinely wouldn't even know.
Here comes the sleeper assassin.
Before Tarantino's Kill Bill, there was a movie about a woman assassin hunting down the people who destroyed her family.
Man, I like this movie a lot.
But more than a revenge tale, it's a story about identity and what's left of a person once their whole life has been built for vengeance. Today's film is the 1973 Lady Snowblood by Toshiya Fujita. The film follows Yuki, a young woman who's raised and molded from birth to avenge her family. It sounds like a classic revenge plot, but what sets it apart is its structure and style. The story here isn't told in chronological order. It jumps through chapters, freeze frames, and illustrated panels pulled straight from the original manga. And then there's of course the visuals. You have blood spraying across snow and Yuki's white kimono, and all of this comes together to make Yuki seem like a mythical demonic creature. Every time she's on screen, it feels like rage and quiet composure sitting in the same frame. I think it's a really great film, and it tries to break out of the traditional revenge mold. It shows what revenge actually costs and how it gets passed down through generations. If you've only seen Kill Bill, I highly recommend you go ahead and watch this.
You know, Tarantino stole almost everything from Asian movies.
The Hat Man is such an interesting topic to me because back in the 70s, sleep clinics started to notice this pattern amongst their patients. Over the course of the next 20 years or so, they noticed that a large amount of the patients that were seeking help with their sleep all described seeing the same figure. A dark, shadowy figure wearing a top hat and standing in the doorway or in the corner of their room watching them sleep. And what researchers found most interesting was that these reports all came from people who had never heard of each other, spanning across different countries, cultures, and religions. And none of these people had an explanation for who or what this entity was. They had no name for it either. So doctors specializing in sleep wanted to study this phenomenon because they believed it showed one of the clearest examples of how the human brain constructs hallucinations in a really predictable way. Because why were all of these people feeling a presence when none existed, and why was this specific entity consistent across a spectrum of humanity? But unfortunately, their studies didn't explain a whole lot about this either. They determined it to just be a hallucination that occurs during sleep paralysis, where your body is pretty much paralyzed, but you're fully conscious. But being classified as a hallucination by doctors doesn't stop people from believing that the Hat Man is a real entity. Some people have even claimed to have captured pictures of him, and if that's true, then that begs the question, how are we seeing him on film if he's just a figment of our imagination?
I don't know. Maybe because it was real, science only goes so far.
The only difference between the Graham family and most families is that most families never hear the click. But Ari Aster definitely heard it, and he built the entire film around the ritual structure that's mentioned in the Keys of Solomon. In the book, it shows you geometry, direction, and sequence. The book specifically states that you face to the northwest, and that a crowned figure will arrive, and that sound will precede the actual form. These aren't just atmospheric details. Aster borrowed the instructions, and Hereditary follows them with the precision of someone who read the manual before they wrote the screenplay. The treehouse sits to the northwest of the house, exactly where the text says it should be. This geometry isn't set design, it's the spatial requirement for the reception. Astor used the architecture of the ritual for the entire film. Payman has an effeminate face and requires a male host, which is why no other female in the Graham family could hold the spirit of Payman. 3 generations of women in the Graham family that was always moving towards Peter. Payman arrives preceded by sound, trumpets, instruments, noises that cross the threshold before the form does. Charlie clicks not as a quirk, but as a symptom of the arrival of Payman. Charlie was the sound, Peter was the form. Then we have Payman's seal, which must be drawn correctly before the summoning can begin. The seal is the geometric signature that opens the channel between Payman and the other side. Annie has been drawing it for years into her miniatures and into the backgrounds of her work. Payman requires a blood sacrifice when called alone. So Charlie dies at a boundary marker, the spot in between carrying the charge, the edge of the road where one space crosses into the boundary of the other. Charlie's death isn't just a horror movie car accident. It's the blood offering made at the exact location at the exact right time. Payman is the 9th spirit and one of the only 9 kings of the entire Goetia hierarchy. Kings cannot be rushed. They need generational preparation. The text is very specific that you cannot rush the protocol for the summoning of the king. Ellen started it knowing it wouldn't be done in her lifetime. She knew it would take generations until it was finally completed with Peter. 3 generations is the minimum time frame that the text says that is required for the king. And Payman must be received with his legions present. That's why we have the cult in the treehouse bowing around the circle. The Lesser Key's description of Payman's reception is anchored in the final shot of this film. And then there's you, because the Lesser Keys also states that it requires an audience. And this film has been watched by over millions of people. Every time that someone watches the final scene, they are watching the completion of the ritual. Astor said in a quote that he wanted the ending to feel inevitable rather than horrifying. That word is already in the Lesser Key. It states that if the protocol is followed correctly, the outcome isn't surprising. It isn't horror, it's completion. You don't have to believe in Payman for the structure to have worked. You just had to watch, and you already did.
So far, nothing has topped Hereditary since it came out.
The Borisovka mammoth, a mammoth that was frozen into permafrost, and he was sitting on his haunches, and both of his hips were broken. He had food in his mouth and in his stomach, and even the contents of his stomach had not putrefied, which meant that it got frozen, and the scientific study suggested that the entire carcass would have had to have been frozen within about 10 hours to prevent putrefaction of the material in the stomach. So how do you freeze a 6-ton mammoth in 10 hours? That's where it gets, that's the conundrum. Something happened, and quickly.
This and The Red Shoes are the 2 most beautiful color films ever made. I was almost 9 years old. And as I said many, many times, having had terrible asthma, my parents took me to the movies all the time. My father took me to see this film. I don't know how, a guy who was working in the garment district for 40 years picked up on The River, to go see this thing. It turned out to be one of the most formative movie experiences. And I know I say that about a number of films, but this was something different and special, particularly the use of color. There's no doubt about that. I would say this and The Red Shoes are the 2 most beautiful color films ever made. But I think something else happened when I saw that picture. It was the first exposure to a very foreign culture. It was the first color film to be shot in India, but I think the color in the film affected me strongly, and no doubt the nature of the culture that it was depicting, albeit through Western eyes. That's very important. I think Renoir wrote in his biography, he said that the Indians felt that it was better for Westerners to make a film about India through Western eyes because they didn't think that the Westerner could really understand the culture and know the problems, really understand the problems of the country they felt. At times, people see the film today and they say, well, it's seen through colonialist eyes. Well, Ruma Garden, lived there. And whether it's colonialist eyes or not, it still has truth to what it is to be a human being. It's more than just the exotic because quickly you find out it's not just exoticism. There are problems. The people live a certain way, believe things differently. So at first, if the gold and the glitter and the color gets you, it's still the real power is the humanity in the film and the humanity of the culture, what it is to be Hindu and to see life a different way. I don't know if the film shows that, but it makes you interested in that. I think it made me interested.
In 1972, a gang of looters hunting for pre-Columbian artifacts in the northern jungles of Colombia stumbled upon an ancient set of stairs to a lost city filled with the remains of an ancient civilization you've probably never heard of. Welcome to episode 49 of Ancient Site Sunday. I'm Raven, an archaeologist. I'm trekking to this lost city in February, and you're invited to come with me. So let's learn about Ciudad Perdida. Built by the Tairona people around 800 CE, Ciudad Perdida sits high in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta mountains and is believed to have been one of the most important urban centers in the region. Long before the arrival of Europeans, the Tairona created a network of settlements connected by stone pathways winding through the mountains. They were also skilled craftspeople and produced intricate gold pieces, amazing bone carvings, and beautiful textiles. At the heart of Ciudad Perdida are hundreds of circular stone terraces carved directly into the steep hillsides and connected by tiled roads for easy navigation. These terraces supported homes, ceremonial buildings, and public spaces, creating an entire city integrated into the landscape. Massive retaining walls and drainage systems also helped to stabilize the settlement and control water flowing down the mountains. And an estimated 2,000 to 8,000 people would have called these terraces home. Archaeologists believe Ciudad Perdida functioned as both a political and ceremonial center, linking communities across the Sierra Nevada through trade, religion, and shared cultural traditions. Rather than building a city that dominated the environment, the Tairona designed one that worked with the mountains around them. The city was abandoned during the Spanish conquest in the 16th century, likely as disease and colonial expansion devastated indigenous populations across the region. Of course, to the indigenous tribes in the region, the lost city was never really lost. After the city was abandoned, the descendants of the Tairona say they visited and maintained the site for centuries, keeping its location a secret. They revere the lost city as Teyuna, the heart of a network of villages inhabited by their ancestors. Today, much of Ciudad Perdida is still surrounded by dense rainforest, and ongoing conservation efforts work to protect both the ruins and the cultural heritage of the indigenous people connected to the area. If you want to trek there and explore the lost city for yourself with me and a bunch of other archaeology enthusiasts, check out the link in my bio.
Imagine how beautiful it was in its day.
Steven Spielberg said that this was the best way to structure a story.
But that's the greatest way to understand how to structure a story. It's got to be about something. Right. So your first stop is, what do I want to say? Do I have anything to say? You can't write anything until you have something to say.
Now, having something to say is the easy part. Having the guts to say it, that's a whole nother thing. That's why we got to kick it to my Aunt Brown.
You really only have two choices: be sanitized and media trained, which is say nothing about nothing.
Yeah.
Or if you are really authentic in yourself, it'll be warped to the point that you are vilified. What makes us, I think, so interesting and beautiful as people is that we are a combination of holy and profane. We are a combination of shitty and wonderful.
Like in her book, Wired for Story, Lisa Crone says,
and wonderful.
by the way, I interviewed her and it was so good. Check it out. Those who are truly brave tend to see themselves as not brave at all. You just need to use what your mama gave you. I don't know how that fits into this, but that's a good quote.
Did you know Ireland has a saint that is also a mermaid? This is the story of Lee Bon from the Book of the Dun Cow, which is one of the oldest Gaelic manuscripts we have. After possibly murdering his father, an Irish king named Ecca takes his people northward. They meet this giant man named Angus. Angus is like, you guys have to leave, but they're literally too tired, so they just don't. So Angus comes out and kills all of their horses. Then he's like, all right, you guys better leave now or I'll kill you too. But then in one of my favorite moments, Ecca says, how are we gonna leave? You killed our horses. So Angus gives them one giant horse, but he tells them, don't let this horse stop walking ever. If it does, you're all gonna die. They're like, okay, and they continue traveling, and then they let it stop. A magic well rises up under the horse. Worried about what will happen, Ecca builds a house over the well and hires this one woman to watch it all the time and always keep the door locked. But of course, one day the woman forgets to lock the door and the spell was free to work its evil. Water bursts from the well and drowns absolutely everybody, creating Loch Ness. Everyone except Ecca's daughter, Lee Ban. She's protected by God in a little home, a pocket of air under the lake with her little lapdog. She lives that way for a whole year, but then gets weary of being alone and looks at the salmon swimming around her and says, God, I wish I was a salmon and I could get out of here. At those words, she took the shape of a salmon, except her face and breast, which did not change. Although I gotta say, one of my translations said head and shoulders instead of face and breast, and so I imagine her just looking like this. But traditionally, she's a mermaid now, and her little dog gets changed into an otter, and so they swim around and love life for 300 years. Then a monk named Biak is sailing to Rome, and he hears this beautiful singing under the sea, and he's like, who is that down there? And she comes up and she's like, it's me. Here's the story of my life. Then she's like, actually, do you guys want to just take me with you? Biak says yes, but only if you'll agree to be buried in my monastery when you die. And she's like, okay. So they show her all around the land. Everyone's amazed by her. Biak takes her to his church where the saints say, hey, would you like to die now and then get an immortal soul in heaven? Or do you want to live for 300 years and then get an immortal soul in heaven? And she picks die now, which I don't get because she's going to go to heaven either way. Maybe she felt like 300 years already was enough. They give her the name of Mergen, meaning seaborn, and then she dies. It does not say how, but the point is she goes to heaven. Oh, and if you wonder what happened to the dog otter, earlier there was a chieftain when she was being shown to the whole world who killed it. Doesn't say why or how, but she curses him and his whole family line for it, which deserved. And she is now counted among the holy virgins and is held in honor and reverence, and wonders and miracles are performed through her means at Tek de Biak.
All right. Thank you, folks, for staying till the end. I hope you like my lineup. Don't forget to subscribe, likes, and hype the video, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss my next video. Thanks for watching. God bless.